Hey everyone, welcome to Software Testing Mentor and RCV Academy. Today I'm here with Sharan, who is an engineering graduate in 2019. He has been doing some business and has been learning software testing and test automation. So today we are conducting a fresher level mock interview for Sharan. So welcome Sharan, how are you?
So I'm fine, Manish. So what about you?
Good. Thanks, Sharan. So Sharan, before we proceed, I would like to mention that this video is getting recorded and will be posted on YouTube. You're fine with that?
Yeah, sure, Manish. I'm fine with that.
Great. Okay, so let's get started, Sharan. Can you tell me something about your professional journey and background and what learning you have been doing till now?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sharan. I'm from Madurai. So I've done my the school graduation in EBG Metric Higher Secondary School. I'm done my graduation in B Mechanical Engineering from Sedu Institute of Technology, and I'm solution driven while dealing with the problems and conflicts. I was always collaborate to meet with the team's objective, and I'm not aware of my weakness. But however, if there is any, I would rectify it, and I would like to fix all my faults and work for the company. So I was passed out in 2019. So I'm working for the past 3 years with my father. So my father has a iron and steel company, and I was working with him. So I was handling in goods and the customer inquiries and so on. So now I want to work in an environment where I can show my skills and capability. So I'm recently done my manual testing courses in nearby academy. So I'm interested in the software testing field. So under responsibilities are have to understand about the customer requirements, have to write the test scenarios, have to write the test cases, and setting up the environment and executing the test cases, log the test results, and defects and backtracking, have to retest, have to perform various types of testings, and have to submit the daily assigned tasks, have to participate in a review meetings, and so on.
Great. Okay. All right. So good introduction there, Sharon. Now, you mentioned that you have been learning about software testing already, and you have already, in your opening note, you have briefly explained what all roles and
Yes.
responsibilities you will be doing. So, first thing I would like to understand is why do we need to test something?
So we have to give the quality product to the customer. So that's why we are testing,
Right. Great.
Manish.
Yeah. So basically, everyone likes quality product or
Mm.
quality service. So in order to ensure it's of good quality, you need to test it. You need to basically collaborate and see that it is actually fit for use. It is what the
Yes,
customer
correct.
wants, right? Great. Now, what do you understand by static testing and how is it different from dynamic testing?
So static testing means the testing project related documents in the form of review, walkthrough, inspection is called static testing.
Mhm.
And the dynamic testing means we are testing the software in the form of unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and user acceptance testing is called dynamic testing. And the static testing addresses the concern, are we building the right product? And the dynamic testing addresses the concern, are we building the product right? And the static testing will focus more on documents, while the dynamic testing will focus more on software. And the static testing can be done before the verification. Dynamic testing can be done after the validation.
Right. So
So for
basically,
example,
yeah, please go ahead.
the examples of the static testing means developer will write the code and the code will be checked by the another developer before execution. So likewise, the test cases also will be tested by the another tester before execution. So it is the basic differences between the static testing and dynamic testing. It is also otherwise called as verification and validation.
Mhm. Yeah, right. Great points there. You mentioned it's more of a verification or basically going through the documentation. So it's sort of, as the name suggests, it's static in nature, right? So you don't
Yes.
execute the code, you don't launch
Yeah,
the
before
application, right? So
in the
that's
static
what it is,
testing, we don't have to execute.
right? Can you name some of the static testing techniques? What all is used usually?
Yeah, review and walkthrough inspection. So reviews like the requirement review, the code
Mhm.
review, the design
Right,
review, the
right.
test case review, test execution review. And the walkthrough is a completely informal meeting. It is done whenever it's required. It consists of peer members or our colleagues,
Mhm.
right? And the inspection is a formal meeting. They will send a formal mails to all the technical people who are all involved in the project, and that's it.
Great. Yeah. So I think you have learned, like you have read a lot about things like reviews, walkthroughs.
Yeah,
So
inspection.
let's
Yes.
get into a little bit detail around the reviews. So what do you understand by peer review?
So peer review means, so once we write the test cases means we will discuss with the colleague, and after that we have to get the approval from the test lead, so the test manager. So
Right.
once we get the approval, we will start execute the test cases.
Yes. Okay, great. So basically from your peer, you get the review done. It could be anything. It could be your test case. It could be your code, it could be your automation script. It could be any document that you produce or any code or script you produce. If you get it reviewed by your peer, that's what peer review is. It's sort of informal review, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Great. And what are some of the dynamic testing techniques that you know?
Dynamic testing techniques means so we have to execute the once the build get from the developer.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start to execute the test cases after we get the build from the developer.
Right. So what are some of the types, like what types are included in dynamic testings? Like you mentioned about reviews, informal reviews, walkthroughs, they are static testing.
Yes.
What is dynamic testing? What are some of the types?
I'm not aware about that.
You might be aware, but you might get confused. So like unit testing, what is
Maybe.
unit testing?
Oh, unit testing. Yes, yes. The unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and user acceptance testing. Yeah, this is the techniques for the dynamic testing. So unit
These are some
testing
of, yeah,
means
yeah.
so unit testing means developer will write a single code, all single program, and he will conduct the test on that single program. It's called unit testing.
Right.
For example, if there is a module means, so he will write the single program to create the module, right? And he will conduct the test on that single program, whether it is absolutely the working fine or not.
Yeah.
This is the unit testing.
Right. So like you mentioned, like dynamic testing is basically you execute the code and then that's what dynamic testing is. So any of these testing like unit testing, system testing, integration, these testing are performed only when you execute something, right? So unit testing, you execute the code and developer writes that, as you mentioned. So unit is the smallest testable, whatever smallest part that can be tested. It can't be something which is standalone and can't be tested, right? So any unit is something which can be tested. So it's not just a piece of code which you can't test. You can't say that is a unit. A unit is a code that can be tested, right? So you can write a unit test code there.
Unit testing.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. And what do you understand by white box testing?
So white box testing requires the detailed investigation of internal logical programs and structured code. So it is also called as open box testing or glass testing. So the developer, they only will know about the code, right? So we do the black box testing.
Right. So that's basically you as a tester, when you get an application, you do not dig deeper into how the functions are written, how the functions are being called, modules within that, right? So it's more of when a person is doing unit testing, that's what white box testing is, because they are actually writing the code to test that particular module or application code that they have written. Okay, great. Now, what do you understand by negative testing, and what are negative scenarios in testing?
So negative testing means testing the application with the invalid inputs is called negative testing. So for example, if there is a text box means the condition should be enter the numbers. So we should enter apart from the numbers that like alphabets or special numerical characters. So like that we have to enter for like, so I will give another example. So if there is a login page, so if you give a valid username and valid password means it will allows you to log in. So while you click on the login button, so the negative scenario will be so whether you didn't enter the valid username and you click the login and you enter the invalid username and you didn't enter the password. So these are all the invalid scenarios, the negative scenarios.
Right. And what is the importance? Like, why do we do negative testing basically?
So negative testing means so it is used to identify the defects. So the positive testing cases will so it should be easy, right? So when we use the one test case, it should be passed. So we should use a different kind of negative testing. So then only we can able to tell the customer it is a quality.
Right. And then also to ensure that in adverse circumstances, for example, user can do anything with product, right? Like if I get a text box, I can, as an end user, I don't know how you have built it. So I would try with just username and then click on login button. And if it hasn't been handled properly without entering the password and clicking on the login button, if the application crashes, then that's not a good user experience. There should be a proper message that please enter your password or something like that, right? So
error message will appear.
Yeah, sorry. So these are some of the key things. All right. Now, say for example, I'll give you a scenario. So I have a particular feature which is onboarding the customer. Say for example, there is a school database, okay, or school application, and any new student that is being enrolled, they need to enter all the details and submit the application form. All right. So that school can conduct the test and everything like that. Okay. So on that application form, basically there are fields name and then father's name, date of birth, and the address and submit button. Okay. So these 4, 5 fields are there. Can you give me one sort of test case that you will write? Start with the scenario. So give me a high level scenarios that you will conduct for this particular page.
Okay, Manish. So first of all, we have to validate by entering all the fields and click the submit button, and validate by leaving the address. And what is that? So could you please repeat that? So what are all the fields in that?
So name and then father's name, basically parents name, student's name, parents name, date of birth and address.
Okay. So then we have to check whether all the fields are marked with the asterisk symbol. So whether all the fields are mandatory or not. So you don't fill any one of the mandatory field, and we will check with the submit button. And if you don't enter the name and you click on the submit button, if you don't enter the father's name, we will check so whether it is accepts or not. So validate the graphical user interfaces, and then you can able to navigate from to the next page when you click on the submit button, and then validate the number of unsuccessful login attempts. So unsuccessful the submit attempts, like, and so that's it, Manish.
Yes, great points there. After successful registration, they'll get a success message.
Yes.
How would you ensure that the registration has actually been successful? Would you do some sort of backend query? Like, have the entries been successfully entered into the database? Would you check that?
Yeah, we have to check into the database whether all the informations we are they given the user interfaces, whether all the actions are done in the database also.
Right. So basically in the proper table and columns, everything.
We will cross check.
Cross check. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. And what will you use for that? So basically, like, what query? Would you use some query language?
No, Manish. I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
Not,
yeah, that's fine. So basically, yeah, many ways there, but yeah, you will basically, if you're testing database or fields have been entered properly, you'll be using SQL for that. Okay, so that's okay. That's good. All the scenarios that you mentioned is all good. There will be more based on the level of complexity, but
yes,
for the basic level, it's all good. Okay. Now, what do you understand by a test execution?
Okay. The test execution means it should done on the multiple cycles. It should done on the quality assurance environment. So the entry criteria for the test execution is we should have a test case and test data and test plan.
All right, Sharan. So what do you understand by test execution?
So test execution means it done on the multiple cycles. It should done on the quality assurance environment. So the entry criteria for the test execution, we should have the test plan, test data, and test case design. So once we start executing the test cases, so we have to check whether it is a passed or failed. We have to check the status of the test cases, whether it is passed or failed. If it is passed, it is okay. If it is failed, we have to report to the developer and track through JIRA.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned about whatever you understand about test execution is good. You basically should have the test cases. And in terms of entry criteria, there could be more criterias as well, apart from what you mentioned. But yes, the list of entry and exit criteria can keep changing. Now, when you execute the test cases, you would have heard about the test environment as well.
Yes.
Right? So what is test environment?
So test environment means, so the technical word of the test environment is called the test bed. So we should know about the customer environment, what kind of hardware components are they using, and what kind of hard disk are they using, what kind of RAM are they using, and what kind of processor are they using, whether are they using operating Windows or Linux or Unix. So what kind of documentation are they using? So how much the network is the required for that customer environment. So we have to know each and everything about the customer environment. Then only the test case will be passed. We have to replicate that customer environment into our testing environment. Then only the test case will be passed. Otherwise, it will be failed.
That's correct. Yeah. So basically, as close as to the production environment. When you say customer environment, it's more good to say like production environment, like how that application will be deployed in production, what sort of configurations will be there in the server, RAM, memory, etc. That needs to be replicated, sort of. Not always it's replicated, but yeah, it should be as close as possible to the production, because there are costs to the test environment as well. But yes, and that's where you perform the testing of the new features. The new build is deployed and then application is being new features are deployed, and then testers test it and then move it to production, right? Because you can't straight away without testing, you
To the
can't straight
production,
away.
yes.
Yeah. All right. Great. Now, apart from test execution, after test execution, there is a phase about test closure, right? So once you have done the test execution, then test closure is another thing. So why do we have to do the test closure, or why is test closure required?
So test closure, it is a document that gives a summary of all tests conducted in the software development lifecycle. It also gives the detailed analysis of bugs, errors, and found in the testing phase. And there will be the defect report documents, and so some other the documents will be there. I don't know about that. And so there will be a sprint retrospective meetings. So whether we met the customer requirement or not. So these are all will be included in the test closure.
Right. So basically, like retrospective is after every sprint. That's a separate
Will be
meeting.
conducted.
Yeah. But a test closure, as you mentioned, like after the test cycle ended, how did it go? Whether all the required functionalities have been tested, up to what extent, what are the open defects. It will give you a summary for the release managers to basically say or decide whether it's a good, the build is in a good shape so that they can ship it to production or not, right? If the
Okay.
test closure report says there are so many open defects still and they are severe defect, then obviously you can't release it, right? Yeah. Great. So I think that's pretty much it for today, Sharan. Anything you want to ask before we proceed to the feedback?
So can you please ask the questions from Agile also,
Agile. Okay.
Manish?
Okay, great. Yeah, Agile and Jira you want? Jira a little bit?
Yeah, Jira a little bit.
Okay. So in Agile development, how is Scrum different from the waterfall model?
So in waterfall model, so there will be the requirement phase and design, coding, testing, deployment, maintenance. So once the action is done, it is documented. So we cannot add the requirements at between the cycle, right? So if there is any change in the project, we have to start from the beginning. So in Agile, there will be the good communication between the team. So requirements are changed at any stage of the project, allowed at any stage of the project, and it is iterative and an incremental approach. So here customer don't need to wait for the long time for the development of the software. We develop, test, and release the piece of the software to the customer so easily. So it is very easily to adapt.
Right. So you mentioned about that there are smaller sort of iterative development. There are cycles within Agile. What are those cycles or iterations called? What is the another name of the iteration in Agile?
The sprint.
Sprint.
The
Yeah.
sprint cycle.
Sprint.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It
Yeah.
actually happens for 2 to 4 weeks.
Yes. Great. And what is the role of the product owner in your Scrum team?
Okay, the product owner will have to get the requirements from the customer, and he will define the future of the product, and he will prioritize the futures accordingly. So what are all the futures should be done in the sprint 1, and what are all the futures should be done in the sprint 2, and he will also accept or reject the demo product. So while we finished and give it to the product owner at the time, he will also accept or reject. If he accept means we will deliver the piece of the software to the customer.
Right. Yeah. So basically, product owner is the voice of customer. So sort of an interface to get the feedback directly from the customer. And customer is involved very often as well. But then in some cases, if they are not involved, then product owner works very collaboratively with the customer and they are voice of the customer to provide the requirement and prioritize, as you mentioned. So what are other roles? So what are three roles in Scrum?
Yeah, the other three roles are the Scrum Master and the development team and the testing team.
So it's just development team. So there are three roles: product owner, Scrum Master, and development
Scrum
team.
Master, develop. Okay.
Yeah. So in development team, everyone comes, like business analysts,
Everyone comes.
your testing team, your developers. So anyone who builds is a development team, right? Great. And you have mentioned about the retrospective meeting.
Yes.
What happens in the retrospective meeting?
So once the sprint is completed, then a sprint retrospective meeting will be conducted. So in that sprint retrospective meeting, they will discuss about what went well in the previous sprint and what went wrong in the previous sprint. Is there any improvement needed for the upcoming sprints? So likewise, they will discuss in that the sprint retrospective meeting.
Great. And why wasn't this case in Waterfall? Wasn't there any retrospective in Waterfall, or was there Waterfall model?
So in waterfall model, there will be the review, walkthrough, inspection. I think so.
Yeah, there was, but then there was the cycle of it, right? Because it was a phased approach. So by the time this retrospective or the customer demo happened, it was like after a year. or after six
Yeah, okay.
months. So the frequency was like just once or twice in the whole product development lifecycle. And that was the biggest sort of disadvantage. And that's where Agile and Scrum helps that, because it's so
Comes,
frequent. Every sprint you have this
yeah,
retrospective meeting. Every sprint you
meeting,
have this sprint planning.
Scrum meet.
Yeah.
Yes.
So on the same note, what is sprint planning?
So sprint planning means the sprint planning meeting will be conducted at the beginning stage of the project. So at that time, team will plan to develop and test the features during the sprint cycle. So from the product backlog, they will choose some of the features in the sprint planning meeting. And in sprint backlog, from the sprint planning meeting, they will choose committed features to do for the specific sprint.
Right. And sprint planning, how many times it happens usually?
Sprint planning meeting, how many times? So 2 to 3 times per sprint. So I don't know
It, it
exactly.
it just happens once in the start of the sprint. So start of every sprint, you start with sprint planning. And as you mentioned,
Okay.
from the backlog, based on the priority that has been defined by product owner, you pick certain work items that can be delivered. So whatever team feels that they can deliver, they can build and deliver it, they pick it, put it in the sprint backlog, and then they start
The sprint will be
breaking it.
started.
Sprint will be started. They'll start breaking up into tasks, how what needs to be done to build those, and then next sprint again sprint planning, and then
Again.
sprint planning retrospective.
Okay.
So it keeps going on like a rhythm, a cadence,
Iterative.
iterative. So every sprint you
Okay.
have sprint planning, retrospective, and all those. And how frequently daily stand-ups happen?
So Scrum Master will be conducted by the Scrum meeting. So it is also called as the Scrum call or stand-up meetings. So it will be happens for daily basis for 15 minutes. So in that the Scrum meeting, the Scrum Master will ask about what you did yesterday and what do you have a plan for tomorrow, and is there any obstacles in that so in today's task, and so what are you going to do today. So likewise, he will monitor all the technical peoples, so whether the work is done or not.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So monitor is not the right word there, because Scrum Master is a servant leader. So they remove the obstacle. But yeah, I mean, many places they do monitor. So ideally, the what Scrum and Agile says is totally different. Like they are servant leader, they will help the team to achieve. But then because the industry has been functioning in that mode of micromanagement for so long, still people coming from project management background who are becoming Scrum Master, they are sort of taking status updates and monitoring. So, which is in a way correct, whatever you mentioned, but as per the book knowledge, they are the servant leaders. Okay. All right.
Okay, man.
So yeah, let's go to JIRA, some of the JIRA. So what is JIRA?
So JIRA is a defect management tool. So by default, we cannot track the test management activities. So we have to install a special plugin called the Jeffire. So when we install the Jeffire in the JIRA, so we can at the time we can track the test management activities and also defect management activities in a single tool.
Yeah.
So in JIRA tool, we can write the test cases and test execution, the test report, and what are all the actions, the users, the epics, the collections, then product backlog, and the story issues, task.
Yeah. So
like
basically,
everything comes in the JIRA.
Absolutely. So JIRA is not just for testing, as you mentioned, like it's test management or defect management. It's basically an agile project management tool. So when you say agile project management, everything comes in there, right? So all the project management that is required, your backlog, as you mentioned, your sprint backlog, your product backlog, and then with the help of plugin, as you mentioned, Zephyr, or there are so many plugin for test management, X-ray is another one. These two are very popular. And then you have defect management already built in within JIRA. So that's what the tool is all about. Go through JIRA interface. I believe you would have already looked at JIRA and worked a little bit on
Yes,
that, right? Yeah, it's pretty easy.
I saw your videos
Yeah,
by
okay, yeah.
watching JIRA.
Yes, yes. So a brief overview will definitely help, because I think 95% of the organizations nowadays use JIRA. Either they'll use with Zephyr or with X-ray in testing space. So you will always find it there. Okay, I think that's all for today. Sharan, anything you want to ask before we go to feedback?
Yeah, no, Manish.
Okay, great. Okay, so Sharan, your resume is definitely need to improve it. I hope you would have improved it, because this was sent quite a while ago.
Yes.
This is not going to work for sure. The resume that I am holding, it is not going to give you calls, or even if you're, because it doesn't portray what actually you know. Okay. The second thing is, now coming to the feedback, I see very little sort of, I mean, there are areas of improvement and there are always an area of improvement, But considering you as a fresher and you just done courses and learning by yourself, you have pretty good understanding around software testing, around the tools, how things are worked. So I'm pretty impressed, I would say. And this
Thank
is
you,
not
Manish.
just to say for the sake of it. I am truly impressed with the way, the confidence, the way you have answered things. There are a little bit here and there, few mistakes, but that's all okay, right? Your confidence, your willingness to learn, and the way you have explained the topics in detail. I'm truly impressed. If I would have to hire you, you were a clear candidate that would have been there in my team. Okay.
Thank you.
A fresher level. I mean, I don't find people at your skill set and your confidence level, even if I'm interviewing them after 3 to 4 years of industry experience. Okay. So that's a good thing, but take it in a positive way. Do not think that you do not need to learn anything more, right? Keep learning, because the more you will learn, the more confident you will become and more areas of knowledge you will gain, right? So like, go ahead and learn the database testing, go ahead and learn SQL, go ahead and learn Linux, right? See the commands there, go ahead and learn the automation, put everything in your resume. Okay.
Okay, Manish. Sure.
You are absolute perfect candidate to be there in the IT industry. Okay. So
Okay,
all
Manish.
the best for that.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Manish. Thank you, Manish.
All right, cool. So thank you, Sharon. It was a pleasure talking to you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity to participate in a mock interview. So it was quite good. It helped us to gain some confidence. So this is the second time I'm attending the mock interview.
Great, great. Yeah, great.
So okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So likewise, so I don't know about the risk-based testing and some other the forward requirement traceability matrix and the backward traceability matrix.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that.
Yeah, so requirement traceability matrix, I have published a video on that. Risk-based testing, I have published a video on that. What I'll do is I'll send you the links for that. Okay. And you can go through.
Okay,
And if
Manish.
anything after watching those videos is not clear, just ping me, right? Because both concepts are
Okay,
very
Manish.
simple. All right. So requirement
Simple.
traceability
Okay.
is basically, as the name suggests, tracing the requirements and then verifying whether there are relevant test cases written for the requirement, right? Then
Okay.
so all of that traceability comes in picture. So requirement, then test cases, then whether the execution has happened, after execution how many defects were raised. So all of that linking back to the requirement, from requirement to defect and defect to requirement, and these are all done automatically at the moment, right? So there are detailed videos. I'll send you the link so that it sort of
Okay,
more clear.
Manish.
All right.
Okay, Manish.
Okay, great, Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you. Have a nice day.
Okay, bye.